Good morning. Today is Tuesday, December 19th, and welcome to the Illinois Self-Advocacy's December, what's it called? The
webinar.
webinar, yes. And
And
today we're going to talk about Speak Up for Disability Rights with the Illinois Human Rights Authority. Now let's meet the presenters. Jodi and Jean.
Jodi and Jean, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
So I'm Jodi Russell-Baum. I'm out of the Alton area, as Christine said. I was a group home nurse and a psychiatric nurse for several years before I had this position. So I just have a passion for disability rights.
And my name is Seaman, and I am the Disability Rights Manager for the southern regions of the state. So basically anything from Peoria on outside of Springfield. And I've been in this position for over 13 years now, and also have a passion for disability rights. And I'm excited to share with everybody today.
During our time together, we'll explain the purpose of the Illinois Guardianship and Advocacy Commission, describe the mission of the Human Rights Authority, share information about becoming a member of a Regional Human Rights Authority Board. Barbara attends Community Day services and is having her personal cell phone taken away because the staff thinks she's using the phone too much and not working or participating in classes. Staff only returns the phone to Barbara every 2 hours for 10 minutes.
So Adam is getting us started right from the get-go with some speak up and speak out. So he just shared a situation about Barbara, who attends a community day service, and her personal cell phone is being taken away because staff thinks she's using it too much. So what are your reactions? Is that a thumbs up or a thumbs down? You can go ahead and use your Zoom thumbs up, thumbs down. You can take yourself off of mute and say thumbs up or thumbs down. But we want to hear from you, however you choose to speak up and speak out. What do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down? And Tara, if you would let us know what folks are sharing. Are they sharing thumbs up? Are they sharing thumbs down?
All right, so Gary says thumbs down. Annie says thumbs down. Agreed, thumbs down from Greg Walkington.
All right, thank you. Okay, we've got another one that Adam's going to share.
Alex lives in a Scylla community integrated living arrangement. Alex doesn't like or agree with the house rule about residents having their door open whenever they were alone in their room. After multiple complaints, Alex was told by staff that if he did not stop questioning the rule, he could find a new place to live. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
All right, here's another one.
Okay, we've got Megan saying thumbs down. Amy Davis, Annie both say thumbs down. Gary says thumbs down. Megan says thumbs down, and Dennis, as well as Greg.
All right, here's one last one.
Sally is a patient in a psychiatric hospital unit. Sally has had staff force her to take medication even though she tells them all the time that she doesn't want to take it, and it makes her sick. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
Oh, seeing a lot of thumbs down from Leslie, Greg, Mary, Annie, Thumbs down across the board.
All right. Thank you all for getting us started by speaking up and speaking out. And Adam, what's next?
Human Rights Authority.
All right. Now we're going to hear from Jodi and Jean.
Hi, everybody. First off, thanks a lot, Adam, for introducing. That was amazing. Jodi and I are here to talk a little bit about the Human Rights Authority and how you can participate in the authority. And so part of this, we're just going to cover what the authority is about and what we do, and then Jodi's going to talk about participation. So first, I want to say the Human Rights Authority we'll be calling it HRA probably for the rest of this presentation. And the mission of the HRA is to safeguard the rights of persons with disabilities under the Guardianship and Advocacy Act. The HRA covers the entire state, so every county is covered. And it consists of 9 regional panels, and Jodi's going to get into that, and that's where you'll have an opportunity to participate after the presentation, if you decide it's something you want to get into. And the idea of the HRA is to promote systemic improvements to disability rights protections. So essentially what we do is we're complaint-based, and a complaint comes in where someone says that they have had their rights violated by a disability service provider. And so we go and investigate that service provider, and we do so by looking at the laws that govern that service provider and making sure that individuals' rights are being afforded to them because the facility is following those laws. And then something else that we do is we just kind of make sure everybody's receiving services in the least restrictive environment. This is a map of the different offices for the HRA. As you can see there, Chicago is such a big area. There's 3 stars. There's North Suburban HRA. There's the Chicago HRA. There's the South Suburban HRA. And then above that, there's the Northwest, which is in Rockford. There's the Peoria there towards the middle. That's where I'm located right now. There's the Springfield HRA in Springfield. East Central HRA is in Champaign. And then we have the Metro East HRA, which is where Jodi is. And then the Egyptian HRA all the way at the bottom of the state. And these are all the different offices for the different regions that you could volunteer for. And
So,
I think
go
this
ahead.
is where Jodi is going to take over and tell us a little bit about the HRA boards.
Okay. So each of those 9 regional boards consist of volunteers who are decision makers for the complaints. And some of their responsibilities include accepting complaints. So I would present as the disability rights manager. I would come to the board and say, we received this complaint, and the board would vote and decide whether we would open a complaint or not. And one of the criteria for opening a complaint is if it potentially violated a disability right law or regulation. Then they would determine the findings. So we would go out and do a site visit the provider, and review their policies and possibly some records. And then we would compile it all into a report and decide whether they truly violated a person's rights or not. And if they did, they have to come back with a response. And the board, the resolution to that would be the board would work with the provider to come up with a valid response and approve that. So that would be our resolution. The board also participates in the site visits, as I said, and you could be part of a regional board and help people who have had their rights violated. So like I said, the regional boards consist of 9 members. 6 of those members are citizens, so either individuals with disabilities or family members of an individual with a disability. 3 of the members are service providers, which consist of a mental health service provider, a vocational service provider, and a developmental disability service provider. So we have citizens and we have professionals, and that really helps in the decision-making process and the site visits, because we have people who have received services, so they know that side of it, and then we have the providers who know the professional side of it, and it really makes a big impact when individuals go in who are citizens and they meet with these facilities. The board either meets monthly or every other month. My board has decided to meet every other month because it's really just a long process, and to try to get site visits in and get reports done, it's just easier to meet every other month. My meetings are very consistent. They happen on the same day every other month. I do the second Thursday of every other month at 5 o'clock. So the members of the board members, they serve 2 consecutive 3-year terms, and then when their term ends, they have to sit off the board for a year, and then they're eligible to come back if we have space for them. So each board has a chairperson, a vice chairperson, and a secretary, and then a disability rights provider or manager, like myself or any of the other 9 across the state, organize and meet in those regional meetings. At each meeting, the board must prepare by reviewing reports, facility responses. The disability rights manager would send out a meeting packet about a week before each meeting with all those reports and responses in them, so they have a little chance before the meetings to kind of review and be ready to vote on those in person during the meetings. Each board member has training by the disability rights manager, and the majority of that is done online now.
Human Rights Authority investigations. A complaint of an alleged violation can come from the authority from any source: persons with disabilities, family members, service providers, facility staff, guardians, concerned citizens, HRA, initiated anonymously. A complaint can be made by letter, telephone, online, at the GAC website, or personal presentation before the regional authority at one of its public meetings. The complaint's identifier remains confidential. The service recipient's identifier is not disclosed in any public records and is only shared with the service provider if there is a release. The board looks at each complaint and decides as a group on opening the case. The criteria for the board accepting a complaint is a disability rights violation, involves a person with a disability, done by a disability service provider. The HRA board will not investigate frivolous complaints, complaints beyond the HRA scope, allegations of abuse and neglect.
And thank you, Adam, so much for that. And Jodi or Jean, tell us about service providers. They can be investigated.
Sure, I could jump in and help with that. So the type of service providers that the HRA investigate are any entity in whole or in part that provides services to eligible persons. So the HRA will look at hospitals, psychiatric units, special education programs, nursing homes, community integrated living arrangements, CILAs, community day services, It says here that the HRA will not investigate entities that are not service providers like retail businesses. So things like clothing stores, restaurants, banks, gas stations, movie theaters. We would not look into that. The facilities have to be disability service providers.
And
Um,
first, yeah,
We have a
thank you.
question. We have a question from Greg. State developmental centers, do those count as well?
Yes. Yeah, we, in fact, a couple of our offices are located on the grounds of state developmental centers. We have one that's at Choate, and then we have Alton, which is a developer. Jodi, correct me if I'm wrong. That's a state or mental health and developmental center, right?
Yeah, it's a state operated mental health facility.
Yes. Yeah, so we definitely can look into those. That's a great question. So some examples of some issues that HRA would not investigate. So we talked about the criteria. So for example, something we would not look at is we've received calls before where someone says they're not being allowed to smoke at a facility. So under that criteria, that would not be considered a disability right. The right to there is no disability law saying that people have the right to smoke in a facility. In fact, in Illinois, you can't smoke in most places. So that's something that we would not look at. A couple of things that would fall under things that are just outside of our scope and also might be something considered frivolous for us are complaints about a given diagnosis. People will call us up occasionally and say, hey, I've been diagnosed with something like, for example, schizophrenia, and I don't believe that's the diagnosis. We can't go in and tell a doctor to change a diagnosis. And the same thing with medication. People will call and say, I'm taking this medication and it's not the right one for me. Can you make the doctor change it? We can't do something like that. What we can do is go in and make sure that everybody is being allowed to participate in their own treatment and has a voice in their treatment, and that that everything is being done that way. But we can't change a doctor's mind or make them change anything. Then something else are complaints that are not disability related, and this goes back to the criteria as well. The example I always use here is we had an individual call up and say that he had some complaints about the sinus surgery that he was getting ready to have. And sinus surgery would, under our rules wouldn't fall into a disability rights violation. So those are some examples of things that we would not investigate. Here's some examples of how we investigate complaints. So once we receive a complaint and the board has accepted it, what we'll do is go on a site visit. And this is a chance for the HRA board members as well as the disability rights managers to go into the facility and see the facility and talk to anybody involved with the issue. And generally that's what we'll ask for is administrators or nurses or just any staff that would be involved in the issue that the complaint was over. Then that's also a chance for us to walk around, tour the facility, maybe see where the complaint took place, if it's something that we would need to do. And we can even talk to other people who are receiving services in the facility and see what they think. Example where we've used that really well is we've had complaints about not getting enough food at the facility for lunch or dinner. And we've walked around and seen what people are being served and asked people if they're feeling good about the food and if they like it and everything. Then from there, once that site visit is done, we do some research. So we take all of the records and we review those and analyze them. And then we review the laws and rules that may have been violated. and see if the facility, so at this point we have the site visit interview, we have the rules that have been analyzed, and then we have the records that have been analyzed, and we see if there's been any findings with what happened. Then we take all that evidence and information and put it together in a report, which is on the next slide. So how do we report the findings? We put them together, like I said, in a report. And if the report is accepted, it can be accepted with unsubstantiated or substantiated findings. And I get into those in coming slides. When the HRA is happy with the report, they send a copy to the service provider, and then the service provider has 30 days to respond to the report. Now, if the report has unsubstantiated findings, there just really isn't enough evidence or information that was provided to the HRA that rights have been violated. So we'll say that there's just no findings that the complaint occurred. But even if there are no findings from analyzing the policy and procedures and looking at the record, the HRA can make suggestions and send those to the service provider. Then on the next slide, we're talking about substantiated findings. So that's meaning that there is information or evidence that rights have been violated. When the HRA finds that and adds it to the report, the provider, when that report is sent to the provider, they must respond with telling the HRA what they're going to do with the recommendations that are made. And then the provider can also tell the HRA if they don't think that the recommendations are right or fair. Now, in that provider's response, the HRA will receive that response, and they may determine that the rights violations have been resolved and that everything's okay, and they've made these changes. So at that point, the HRA will vote to close the case, and a notice of the final report and case closure will be sent to the complainant and provider, and that report will become part of the public record. So anybody can read a report that the HRA closes. And then we also put those up on our website. Now, there might be a point that the HRA decides that the response is has not resolved the violation that we found, and we go into what's called a negotiation phase with the provider. And essentially, it's us saying, we still need you to make these changes. Then the provider may come back and say, well, we'd rather do this, or we still disagree with you. And we can go back and forth a little bit with those recommendations. Now, we are not what's called an enforcement agency, so we cannot force the provider to make the recommendations. We're strictly an advocacy agency. But if we get to a place where the provider really isn't following, and we think that it's important enough that they do follow, what we can do is send the case for an enforcement referral, and we would send a copy of everything that we found, the reports and stuff, to the enforcement agency. And then from there, usually we get pretty good results. And we get good results anyway. Our cooperation rate is usually always in the 90 percentile. And I think that's because these different facilities are dealing with volunteers that are from the regions that they work in, and could potentially even be people that receive services. I believe there is a question.
Yes, there's a question from Chris, and I think he's asking, how long does this process take?
So usually, what we have in our mandate is that it has to be timely. So It's kind of a loose process. And the reason for that is advocacy will take time. Sometimes we can get a complaint, we can go to the facility, we can have a report by the next meeting, and then they'll send out that report and we get a response for the next meeting, and it may only take a couple of months and everything is resolved. But there are other times where it may go on, for maybe 6 months, 8 months. We've done them up to a year, and even this isn't often, but sometimes we've even gone a little longer than a year, trying to convince and advocate for changes within these facilities. So what I like to tell people is we're not always the quickest, but we're also very thorough. And, as everybody knows, advocacy takes some time to make changes.
Human Rights Authority investigation examples. Jenny has lived at her Scylla home for 12 years and wanted to move to supported housing. She would have occasional outbursts of anger and would say that she wanted to move, and then decided that she wanted to stay. When Jenny was angry with staff, she said that she wanted to leave the Scylla home. Staff said that Jenny could leave, and her signed a handwritten form stating that she wanted to be discharged. So staff took Jenny along with some of her items and her medication to a local hotel. Staff stayed with her until her father came to meet her. Staff then left, considering to be discharged from the Scylla home.
All right. Now, either Jodi or Jean, we heard the example. Tell us about the finding.
So the finding in this case is that the Scylla laws state that individuals can only be discharged for medical needs if the individual or others are in serious danger, if the individual is being transferred to another agency, or if the individual no longer needs services. Also, if the individual is discharged, and the discharge must be in writing, be sent to the individual, have a time frame for action, provide a statement of action taken and reason for the action, and have a statement about the right to appeal. And so in this next slide, the discharge must also be approved by the Department of Human Services. So in this case, none of these actions were taken. So the HRA substantiated findings against the Scylla. And Jenny decided she did not want to return to the Scylla. So the HRA made these recommendations that the facility update their policy to reflect these rules, and also train staff on the discharge process.
Let's check out our next example.
So you want to read it, Adam? Go ahead.
Mark attends the Community Day Service Training Center 5 days a week and really enjoys the work, activities, and being with his friends. Staff came to Mark today and informed him that they are reducing the number of days he attends each week from 5 to 3, beginning this week. Mark expressed his disappointment and asked if they would reconsider the decision, and he was told that the decision was already made and there's no way to reverse the decision. Was this reduction in days done properly? What are Mark's rights?
All right. Before we go to the follow-up or the outcome, we want to hear from you out there. So what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Was this reduction in days done properly? What do you think?
All right, we're seeing a thumbs down. A couple of them from Justin, Greg, Annie, Megan, Amy.
All right.
Sounds like thumbs down.
All right. Sounds like everyone agrees that this reduction in days was not done properly. So now we're going to hear from Jodi or Jean about the finding.
So you are correct. The mental health code states that a written notice shall be given 10 days in advance of an action to deny, modify, reduce, or terminate services. So there was no mention of him receiving a notice of 10-day notice. Mark should also have been given notification of his right to appeal the action. So they were changing his services, didn't give him a written notice, and they didn't give him the right to appeal. They basically just told him the decision is final. No, you have no recourse. And that's definitely not the case. So the most important finding in this is that, if a person makes a decision that you cannot continue with these services, or they change your services and you decide to appeal it, the person who made that initial decision cannot decide the appeal. It has to go to someone higher up or a different person to review that and make an informed decision.
All right, thank you. Yes, there are processes that providers have to follow to do things like changing the days of service. All right, here is our last HRA investigation example. Adam.
Molly was admitted to a local hospital for surgery. Molly's nurse entered her room with a cup of pills and announced that she had Molly's morning medication. She handed her the pills and a cup of water. Molly didn't recognize the color and shape of one of the pills and asked the nurse what the pill was. The nurse said, "It's what the doctor ordered for you. It's what you always take." Is there anything wrong with this scenario?
All right, thumbs up, thumbs down. What do you think? Is anything wrong with this scenario? Imagine you were Molly and you were going in for surgery and the nurse came into the room and said, "Here you go."
Okay, we're seeing a thumbs down from Justin. Thumbs down from Annie. Megan says thumbs down. Greg says thumbs down. Dennis says need informed choice. Thumbs down. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. So let's hear what this finding was.
So you are correct. You should always know what you're taking, what it's for, and what it looks like. And if someone tries to give you something new, you need to ask questions. So Molly learned to identify each medication she takes by name, color, shape, and what it's for. She noticed that one of the pills wasn't familiar, so she spoke up or advocated for herself to make sure she was receiving the proper medication. So Molly's nurse did a few things wrong in this situation. She should have opened the medication packets in front of Molly and told her what each one was as she opened them. That would have given Molly the chance to ask questions about the medications and to make sure she was taking what was normally prescribed to her, which is informed decision making. So if the doctor did prescribe a new medication while Molly was in the hospital, the doctor or nurse should have explained the medication to Molly and their benefits and possible side effects. Then Molly would have been able to make an informed decision on whether or not this medication was right for her. She should have had the opportunity to ask questions and to accept or decline the medication. So the HRA would have made a substantiated finding that Molly was not given the opportunity to be provided informed consent and her rights were violated. The HRA would have worked with the hospital to ensure that everyone is retrained on informed consent and that their policies align with disability laws and regulations.
And all three of these examples are combinations of allegations and investigations that the HRA has done. So these are things that they have engaged with, and the findings that have been had.
Resources.
So this is what the Illinois Guardianship and Advocacy Commission website looks like. You can go to gac.illinois.gov to find out more about the Human Rights Authority. You can also see information about our regional panels and get phone numbers. You can also file an online complaint if you think your rights have been violated. You can also fill out an application to be a HRA board member. These are some of the regional office phone numbers. So if you're interested in becoming an HRA board member, you can do the following. So I would suggest contacting Gene, and his email is there, or like I said, you can go on our website and fill out the volunteer application.
And they are specifically looking for people with disabilities to be those citizens who are part of their regional HRA or Human Rights Authority boards.
Any questions or comments?
I think I saw that somebody had one that might have been missed in the thumbs up and thumbs down. Chris asks, no, when did this process start? And I think if you are talking about when the agency started, we were developed, I believe the year was 1975, but if not, it was mid-70s. And we were put together at the same time as a piece of legislation called the Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities Code. And the idea was that Illinois really wanted to start working on advocating for the rights of people with disabilities. So they started our agency, which also includes the Office of State Guardian, who are guardians of last resort for adults in Illinois. And then legal advocacy services, who helps and represents people who are going through mental health commitments and appeals and court-ordered medication and things like that. Did that answer that question?
Okay, and while we're waiting for Chris to respond, we have a question from Justin. Is this another call for volunteers?
Well, I think Justin was asking because unfortunately in the different regions, as Jodi talked about, we can only have 9 different members at a time. And Justin wanted to get involved, but his region already was filled with 9 people. And Justin, so this is a call for across the state. Not every region does have a full board, but unfortunately, the one in your area does have one. So I think that what's going to happen is the disability rights manager from that area is going to get a hold of you when there's an opening. What we try to do when people are interested and the boards are filled is we hold on to the applications and we get a hold of people later that are interested.
Okay, and then Megan's asking which regions have openings for their board.
Oh boy, that's a good question. So there's 9 different regions. I am aware of just are the southern regions. I know I want to say Peoria does not have an opening right now. East Central may have an opening, so the one in Champaign. The Egyptian region has an opening. And then Jodi, your region, I believe, has one, but I'll let you speak.
Yes, we just had a board member that had to resign just a few days ago. I finally had a full board, and then a member resigned. So I have an opening in the Metro East area.
And as far as the northern regions, I'm pretty sure that there's outside of the one the one in Skokie that is full. I think the other two Chicago area regions have openings, and then the Rockford region definitely does have openings in it.
Okay, another question from Dennis Dini. Does the Human Rights Authority coordinate with other agencies, such as the Office of Inspector General, Equip for Equality, and others? Do they share information or provide leads into issues that might need further follow-up?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the short answer is yes. I will say for OIG, it's a different agency because they strictly investigate abuse allegations, while we strictly investigate rights violations. So if we hear something that is an abuse allegation, we'll definitely get a hold of OIG and talk to them about that sort of situation. And then we'll even look at reports and things like that from OIG and see if there's something that the HRA may get into. I can say that our agency administration has pretty frequent meetings with Department of Human Services and different other state agencies just to make sure everyone's on the same page. And issues like that are brought up in that situation as well. And they kind of try to work together, even outside of investigations on issues. Equip for Equality, and we've definitely had contact with them before. We've sent people their way. Equip for Equality does a lot of legal services, and so we'll refer to them in situations where something like that may be needed. We don't provide legal services, at least in the Human Rights Authority part of the agency, only in legal advocacy services. And then we have some special education related legal services that we provide. Are there any other questions? These are all great.
This is Christine, and while we're waiting for any other questions or comments to come in, Adam, would you share how folks can connect with the Alliance?
Yes, we have a couple of ways that you can contact us. We have an email, website, we're on Facebook, and we're also on YouTube.